You ready, big bro?
Yep.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right, clap once if you hear me. Sorry, it's a teacher thing. My wife is a teacher. Thank you all. Thank you for coming back and for being willing participants in a great event. We've been having a great time. So please continue eating while I chat with my friend, Dr. Ruben Anthony, about how our organizations are working towards a brighter, more equitable future for the Madison region. And we'll close out our afternoon later with some dessert on the Grand Terrace to celebrate 10 years of partnership. So we've reached the point where this is one of my favorite times is when Ruben and I get a chance to chat and talk, because we don't get a chance to chat and talk all the time. But last year, Doc, I, along with many others in the room, stood on Park Street at the groundbreaking in the snow, cold weather. And that's how I knew you were really important, man, because there was a lot of people standing in the snow and in the cold for the Black Business Hub. And so if you could give us some updates. I see the building, it's growing up. So what's going on?
Yeah, so on last April, on a very cold day where the governor was shaking pretty bad out there because it was so cold, and other public officials, Joe Priestley and other folks were pretty cold out there, but we had 400 community members come out to watch us break ground on the Black Business Hub. If you've been on Park Street, you can see the Black Business Hub is coming up. We're expecting that on July 1, we'll have our first tenant move into the building. All right. Remember what I said now. It was all right when I paused to do your thing now. All right. Thank you. It is a lot of work, and thanks to our team led by Ed Lee and our staff and our consultants, and also, our fundraising team. I think I saw our two fundraising chairs in the house and some other members of our fundraising committee. Stand up for a round of applause. Come on, you know you like the limelight, Derek. I saw Kathleen Falk in here, our former county executive. Maybe she left by now. But anyway, the hub is coming along really well. It is a $26 million fundraise for the core and the shell, and we raised about $25.2 million. We got another $800,000 to go for the core and the shell. But with inflation and also the tenant improvements, our tenant build-outs, we expect to raise another $2.5 to $3 million. But nothing's going to stop us from opening up the hub sometime in September. Now, Ed is cringing because he's like, you know, a specific day. Yeah, but we're looking at sometime in September for opening up the hub. But prior to that, on July 22nd, we're actually going to have our Unity Picnic. And at our Unity Picnic is going to be right in front of the hub this year. We've got bands that's going to come there. Michelle Heisinger has done a great job of making all that work out. And we're going to give tours after all of you are invited to the early part where 11 o'clock, we're going to have many of our supporters and senior citizens from the community come, and party with us. We'll have special cooking there, and then we're going to do tours of the hub. So the hub is moving along pretty well. We've partnered with Generator, which is a national accelerator program, to begin the training now because we know that businesses don't need to wait. We can start, working with them now. And with that partnership, we've touched already almost 50 businesses with training or grants and loans. So there's a lot of moving parts to the hub, but we're really getting it done. So really glad that we've got a team of volunteers and our staff really moving it forward. All right, Jason, I got a question. I'm going to veer away from the script for a minute, and I'm going to ask you, what's up with all that black and gold, man, with the you know what I'm saying? Oh, we got some alphas in the audience. And so last night, I was asking Jason, I said, now don't come up in here all dressed to the nines and don't tell me what you're going to be doing. And Jason, said, well, I'm going to wear black, so I wore black, too. And then he said, well, I'm going to be representing my fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha.
That's right.
So I'm representing my fraternity, Kappa Alpha Psi, with the red, all right? All right, so we got these dueling fraternity colors on, and that are really setting things out.
Honestly, and we are moving away from the script, but it's one of the beautiful things. No, it's not. It's just one of the things Ruben and I love to do. I think it shows part of the spirit of us working together, because we have fun, because I think we understand what's important. How do we move the needle for this community? And how do we work together? And you all, he's nice and loving to you all. He a little tough with me when it comes to his little brother over here.
I'm a little tough when you be coming asking for some money. But anyway, let's get back to the script, Jason. So about 5 years ago, I had the pleasure of serving on the steering committee for MadREP's Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. How are things going with the planning for the next 5 years? What do you got for us, Jason?
Thank you, Ruben. And for all of you who may not be aware, but MadREP is charged with performing and putting together a comprehensive economic development strategy. And that's the next 5 years. Where are we going? Who needs to be involved? What does that look like? And part of our relationships with many of you in the room means we have to come together and figure that out. And one of the things that this SEDS does is it puts us in a position to ask, where do we want to go? What's the future of our region? And a couple of things we need to look at when we try to develop that answer. It's a project that while MadREP leads, it's not just on MadREP. It's about everyone in this room. If you care about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you need to know where we're going. If you care about housing, which the Greater Madison Urban League has done, if you care about jobs and training, and how do we keep our #1 rankings, you need to be involved in some way, shape, or form. And so this comprehensive economic development strategy, many of you were involved before. It was called Advance Now 2.0. It's going well. We've gotten to a point where next week we'll be finally interviewing a consultant who will be working with MadREP on a project. But again, it's for all of us to answer some of those economic questions. How do we become better? And how do we become better for everybody in our 8 county areas? And that includes rural, urban, people of the BIPOC community. That includes everybody. What do we need to do to make sure that this is a thriving place? And Ruben said it earlier, what do we want to do to make sure that when people look at our region, right, if they have the choice to choose between the North Carolina, the Research Triangle, or Boston, or South Carolina, we want to make sure they choose us. And so the strategy is going very well. I'm excited. It will be my first comprehensive economic development strategy, Doc. And, we were talking with my dear friend, County Executive Joe Parisi, and I got to say this. Ruben and I get to come up here and dress in suits and banter back and forth, but we just come and look good. I mean, that's really what we're charged with. Where's my team at the table? They're going to hate me for. Would you all stand up and let them know? Look at Kathy. She doesn't want to stand up. And Jess and Jean and Craig, did you guys stand up? Don't think I don't see you in the back. Wave your hand so everybody knows. So if anything goes wrong, those are the people you need. So Ruben, Doc, we've been talking about just the strategies and where to go. And in many of our conversations, your housing program has had great success. Could you tell us a little bit and lean into the benefits and how well it's been going?
All right. So before I address that, I can't let you have your people stand up without having my people stand up. Look at Ed over there with that nice suit jacket on. Urban League members stand up. You rarely see Ed with a suit coat on, but look at him. My Urban League folks, stand up. I know you're out there working, but stand up so you can get recognized as well. Check out Ed. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So, housing is a big deal. Here in Madison, there's a 2% vacancy rate just in housing in general. So it's hard to find rental housing. But if you look at the disparities among housing between blacks and white, it's a major problem. In the country, around 46% of African Americans are homeowners, and 70% of whites are homeowners. If you look at the state, it's around 25%, African Americans. But in Dane County, it's 10%. So, when I first started work at the Urban League, we were moving away from the housing program. But with these statistics and with these differences, we need to not move away, but we need to step on the gas and do more in this area. So we decided to implement a Housing 2.0 initiative. Prior to that, we used what they call low-income housing tax credit, LIHTC, and we did 57 homes through that. Recently, in the last couple of years, when we talked, we purchased 16 homes, but we used New Markets tax credits to purchase those homes. But we had in mind wealth building, just like we have with the hub, to make sure that we were not only giving people homes, but giving people an opportunity to build wealth. Because for most of us, our home is what we build our wealth in. We get that equity. We can pay for college tuition. We could pay for retirement. We can pay for businesses and things like that. But a lot of times, African Americans are excluded from that. And so we barreled down. We purchased 16 homes. We remodeled those homes. All those homes have been sold to families. The Urban League acted as the bank. And we financed those homes. And typically those folks that actually got financed, they didn't have banking relationships, and they might not have been financed by a bank. But when we looked at the fact that some of these folks had been in their homes or in their apartments for 10 years, and their rent was more than what they'd have to pay for mortgage. And so we were like, this is a good deal that we ought to be making and banks ought to be making. And so we made the deal. But now for 7 years, these families would pay interest only, for their loans, but they sort of have a little bit left to put them in what we termed a wealth building / maintenance fund. And so if something happened with the house, they could use that money to solve the problem, or they could have that money accumulate for 7 years. And not only will they have equity in their home, but now they've got this other pot. And this is what wealth building is all about. I paused. Yeah. Yeah. And so now we're becoming a HUD certified, agency. Our application is in, and we have one HUD certified staff on in our agency. And so now we're going to be doing homeowner programs to train people, to get them ready to build banking relationships for homes. So already families have accumulated, 40, 50 grand, in the program, in their savings. And with the markets fluctuating, all that improvement that we put in the home, that equity goes to them. So this is what wealth building is all about.
Thank you, Doc. I think one of the things that you'll find is when MadREP, when we're looking at our plans and tools in our toolbox, one of the things that we try to do is not duplicate what other organizations are doing. And I think one of the reasons why you see the relationship between the Urban League and ourselves is we do try to talk to each other about what's the strategy. And so with that, MadREP launched a revolving loan fund. And what we're looking to do is, there's a lot of money out here, everybody. I mean, let's be very candid. $7.6 billion in opera dollars that came from the federal government to the state. Well, our approach at MadREP is how do we move the needle for small businesses, both in our urban and rural areas? And how do we look at making sure that what we're trying to do is make a sustainable case for entrepreneurship? And so we launched our revolving loan fund. And shout out to Craig, who's been running point on that. We're making our first $100,000 loan fund, $100,000 loan, right? And there's more to come as we look. And I have to say this, and then I'll be done. We've been strategizing and looking at how do we play off of one another. The Tech Hub is brilliant. I mean, the Black Business Hub is brilliant, what Ruben is doing. Myself, our board, and our teams, we are looking at how do we play to our assets here in our region. And we have to talk about lab space and biosciences and biohealth because it's a major component. And I'll say this, ladies and gentlemen, I have a fear that we do not promote people of color in science, technology, engineering, and math fields as much as we should. You will, yeah. And so the things that you'll see from MadREP is how do we increase the participation? And I saw Baltazar from the Latino Academy. I saw him here. That's where we need to go if we want to keep our #1 rankings. And our loan funds and other tools in our toolbox will do just that.
Yeah. So when I look at the work that MadREP is doing, and I look at this partnership, you know, and I don't want to be arrogant, but no wonder we're #1 in the state, you know, for regions, because you guys do exceptional work, you know, and this partnership is just going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. So I'm really appreciative of celebrating our 10th year anniversary of this event with you, and the best is yet to come. So
I'm glad you let me up here on the stage with you.
No, So now we're going to introduce our luncheon speaker. This person has become a good friend. It's our county executive, Joe Parisi. He has called Dane County home his entire life. County Executive Parisi is a friend of the Urban League of Greater Madison. The type of partner that we've been talking about today, who didn't just talk, but he actually does. He's a doer. If he tells you he's going to do something, you can count on it. So we had early discussions about the Black Business Hub and developing the Black Business Hub. As soon as we had that conversation, on day one that we had that conversation, he says, I got your back. And he contributed $2 million from the county to the Black Business Hub, and I'm so thankful about that because that gave us the credibility that we needed to really have a viable product or project. And every day, you know, now as that hub is being built, you know, when I drive down Park Street, you know, I get emotional because I'm like, wow, you know, this is going to be the project, the economic development project that's going to keep giving, not today, but for generations beyond us. And we couldn't have made that happen if we didn't have the support, you know, and the confidence of Joe Parisi. So now I'd like to introduce a friend and longtime supporter of the Urban League, our county executive, Joe Parisi.
Thank you, Ruben. I appreciate it. And the crowd should thank Ruben for something that you're not aware of yet, and that's that Ruben used about half my talking points in his talk. So my talk just got a little shorter, which will be great for lunch. I want to thank Jason and Ruben for your contributions to this community. Jason and I was doing the math, Jason. We've known each other close to 20 years now. We came into the state legislature together in the same class and shared some interesting experiences, to say the least. And I was so excited when Jason came on board with MadREP. And when I think of the timing of when you came on board, I think of the saying, may you live in interesting times, because you sure have. But the accomplishments you've made under Jason, MadREP has thrived. And I just couldn't be happier that my friend is living in Dane County. We lured him over, and the transition has gone well, and he's doing great things. And Ruben, my friend, we have partnered on so many projects. And Ruben is someone I just personally admire and appreciate, and someone who just makes a difference in so many lives in so many ways. So, Ruben, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Oh, there's one other thing I wanted to mention. You know, we were having that conversation about staff. You know, usually we have our little private conversations and say some things in public. Jason was sharing how we were talking about how our staff goes out and does all the work, and we get to come up here and take credit for it. It's a great job, right? But Ruben, do you remember the part, I think there might have been a little embellishment. Jason said something about he gets to stand up here and look good. I may have just missed that part of the conversation, but no, you look great, Jason. Thank you. I appreciate it. But seriously, folks, as they say, Jason reminds us that while our job and population growth bring many opportunities, with that also come many challenges. Housing, transportation, equal access for both urban and rural communities, and that perhaps our biggest challenge is to ensure that everyone in our community has access to all the opportunity our success makes possible. And that's why we're all here today, because we agree that while thriving is great, ensuring that everyone benefits from the opportunity our growth offers will be how we measure our success. And this will take conscious and sustained effort. Effort like we've seen from so many of you in this room. We're seeing success and we're seeing progress in many of the companies and organizations here today, including Dane County government. And speaking of staff, I won't make you stand up. If you want to, you can, but could you raise your hand, Dane County staff? Could we hear it for you folks? Yeah. 2 tables worth. There we go. We have folks from our OEI and we have folks from various departments. And I'm going to brag on my team just for a minute, because what we're really interested in is process, but what we're really interested in is results. And I was presented with a report earlier this year conducted by the it's called African American Employment Patterns in Greater Madison, and it was authored by the African American Jewish Friendship Group in Madison. And I just lifted a couple of quotes. And this is the work that our team does. This is the work that our staff does. From the report, there are some bright spots where the percentages of the administrative and executive positions better reflect the population, such as Dane County for all categories. In Dane County government, the percentage of each category employing African Americans equals or exceeds the percentage of African Americans living in Dane County. And I think that's something to be proud of and that we should all shoot for and we can all accomplish. So thank you. And our efforts in county government are driven by our Office of Equity, but not confined to that office. Our goal has always been to weave equity into the fabric of county government. And as such, every department and every employee has a common goal and a role to play. And that's why we have representation from OEI and other departments here today. We also work with partners like the Urban League to help accomplish our internal goals as well as our community-wide goals. I mentioned last year, and I'm sure everyone was here last year, took notes and remembers exactly what I said. But at the risk of being redundant, we have a great partnership with our friends at the Urban League and our friends at the Latino Academy of Workforce Development. I saw Baltazar here earlier. Baltazar, are you and any of your team still here? Let's hear it for those guys. What an amazing organization they are. We've partnered with these 2 organizations on a pipeline project. In our highway department, we recognized it as being a department that needed to diversify, needed conscious effort to diversify the department. And so we looked for what were the roadblocks. Why was this not a diverse department? And one of the roadblocks was that it requires a CDL, a commercial driver's license, in order to work there. And that can be hard to obtain. So we partnered with the Urban League and with the Latino Academy of Workforce Development to develop a program through which people they work with who are interested in getting a CDL and maybe coming to work and getting a career in Dane County, it's a good paying, benefited, state benefits, all that stuff, career, so that we could develop a program. And we developed a program through which we hire people on as LTEs. They have some initial training and screening with these 2 organizations. They come on and they work with us, and while they're working with us, they also get trained in heavy equipment and trucks and everything they need to learn in order to go take their CDL test. They take their CDL, and then they're able to compete for the jobs that we have at the highway department. And these pipeline approaches are so impactful and effective because from start to finish, the goal is what are the skills I need? What is the job I want to end up in? And you create that pipeline, and it's been extremely successful. The department has diversified. It continues to diversify, and it's stronger because of it, because we have so many different perspectives now working on problem solving and approaching in that department. And so I can't say enough when people are looking at their businesses and want to, looking for ways to diversify and make sure your population reflects, your folks reflect the population. building those deliberate pipelines, then it's the gift that keeps on giving. Then it just has to keep going, and more and more people come through. So it's been a highly effective, and that's just one example of the importance of organizations like these and why it's so important to support them. We also partner with Centro Hispano on a very similar program now with our 911 emergency call center. And that's been a wonderful benefit for the county. Again, it's putting people on a career path, and it's helping us with more bilingual and bicultural folks who can answer 911 calls. So the importance of pipeline is something I can't say enough about. And as Ruben mentioned in another one of my talking points he used, we're also an early investor in the Black Business Hub, because building Black wealth isn't just about job training. Job training and jobs is important, but it's about entrepreneurship, and it's about community. And it's about home ownership. I won't go over what Ruben talked about because he did such a great job of explaining his program, but I know that Jason has always also reached out to me about the importance of this holistic approach and the importance of having housing be front and center when we're looking at the amazing growth that we're having, so people don't get left behind. So I think I'll close now, and I'm just going to say if everyone's going to have access to the opportunity to succeed, we need to take deliberate steps forward and do what's necessary to create the community we can be. So again, thank all of you for being part of this effort. And seriously, Jason and Ruben, thank you guys. I respect you and really appreciate your friendship and your partnership. And thanks everyone who's here for taking the time to be here and make this a priority. I appreciate it. I hope you have a great rest of the conference. Thanks.
Thank you, County Executive Parisi, dear friend of mine, whose heart and just has always been in the right spot since when we came in together at the state capitol. So thank you, Joe, for being exactly who you are. I am pleased to welcome a fraternity brother of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. That's not what it says, but I'm going to give that to you all anyway. Our keynote speaker, another big brother of mine, and gentleman who I love and respect dearly, Troy LeMay Stovall. As the CEO of TEDCO, Maryland's economic engine for technology companies, Troy leads the organization's mission to support economic development through the cultivation of an inclusive entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem. In other words, he leads innovation to market. Troy has more than 25 years of experience in investment management, higher education, telecommunications, information communication technology, and management consulting. He's a subject matter expert in capital stack formation and a frequent author and speaker on venture capital, economic development, diversity and inclusion, and higher education administration. In fact, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that among many accolades, Troy was awarded the Thurgood Marshall HBCU CFO of the Year. That's what I said, right? Troy graduated cum laude from Southern Methodist University with a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering. He earned a Master's of Science in Computer Science from Stanford University and an MBA from Harvard University. Now, I've been thinking about what I'm going to say personally about Troy. And I told Troy I was going to say something, but one, thank you for welcoming me and Jess to Maryland. Troy made me feel like I belong. It was just family. But I was thinking about what I wanted to say to Troy, and I was reading Troy's bio information to my wife last night. And at one point, she stopped me and said, "Are you still talking about the same guy?" And I said, "I know, right? This guy is freaking golden. Are you kidding me?" And so, Troy, I can only imagine that after God got done making you, he just took a step back and said, "Yeah, this is good." Ladies and gentlemen, my big brother, Troy Stovall.
Appreciate you, brother. Thank you for that. It's great being here. First of all, I have to thank my God for giving me the capacity and the capabilities to be here. I want to say congratulations on 10 years of MadREP. When Jason first told me about it, I was thinking that was some Midwestern rap group, but I understood that was the acronym you guys decided to use. Jason, again, thank you. You got, and Ruben, you know, it's okay being, you know, what you are, but it's cool. I like you anyway. It's all good. So I'm sure many of you are wondering, what the heck is somebody from Maryland doing here to talk to folks in Madison? Well, it starts with an M, so let's start with that part of it, right? And I'm sure many of you like crab cakes, you know, that whole thing. So we, and I'll talk to you about, I'm going to talk about myself a little bit, but TEDCO, and then I got a chance to receive some documents. And Jessica, thank you. Jessica has been great. Please give Jessica has been just outstanding, working with me and getting me here and doing all that she does here for Madison. And then I want to really talk about what I consider, when I looked at the program, the work that you guys have done, and when I had to talk about how 2 C's help frame 4 S's to solve the 3 T dilemma, okay? So, but before I get to that, again, why am I here? So, TEDCO had, and again, I'll explain TEDCO. TEDCO had a tech fair actually sponsored through Senator Cardin's office, who just announced he was not running again, which has created a whole lot of politics in Maryland because he's announced. And we had a tech fair, and what the tech fair was about was how do we bring these really large Fortune 500 companies, the Googles, the Metas, the Squares, how do we close the gap between them and companies that are started by people of color and women? And so we put together this service. A young lady named Tammy Thomas, who's our Chief Marketing Development Officer, led the charge, and literally in 3 months, pulled off an amazing affair that Cardin attended that allowed, we had 8 of these very large Fortune 500 companies that were in attendance, and over 300 entrepreneurs and innovators came, and they literally had one-on-one interactions, and they had workshops working with, and we've got a lot of great metrics. You'll hear me talk a lot more about metrics here in a minute. Metrics are showing the impact of that conference. And so my friend Jason and Jessica were there. They had a great time. And from that, we built this relationship, and that's got me here today. How about that? So first, about me. So 2 things about me that are going to be relevant in what I'm going to talk about. And both about, you know, as Jason said, thank you, I'm an engineer, computer scientist who went to the dark side and got his MBA guy. But growing up, I grew up in Houston, Texas, by the way. Grew up in Houston, Texas. And I grew up in Houston, and I really initially wanted to be an astronaut or an astronomer. And so I bring you that because later on I'm going to talk about celestial bodies. And just to age myself, I used to work for the Johnson Space Center. I actually, in high school, they had a really cool program to bring more kids into blacks and into STEM. So I got to work at the Johnson Space Center, and I got to write a little bit of code that this is when, I'm really about to age myself, when they literally was dropping the space shuttle off the top of 747s. So I wrote a little bit of code, telemetry code, that was used to pull data off of the space shuttle at the time. So the second thing I wanted to be was a priest. So I went to Catholic school from pre-kindergarten through 12th grade. And so, and I was an altar boy. I did everything. I still can recite the church in Latin. I'm not Catholic anymore. My wife decided when we got married, she said, I do not want to get married in a Catholic church because if I have to divorce you, I'm not going to the Pope. And so if I want to get rid of you, I just want to be able to get rid of you. And so I still can say the Mass in Latin. I mean, that's just how inoculated I got. And so I actually went to seminary. Don't think too much of me. I was there maybe a couple hours. And I realized there were a few things in the whole silence and chastity and other stuff that wasn't going to work. So keep those 2 things in mind as I talk to you about the rest of my talk. So TEDCO. So actually on May 21st, TEDCO will be 25 years old. And we're actually, if you go up, Tammy's been posting and the team's been posting all day today. We just released a series of articles about our 25th anniversary. What we're going to be doing is, I did an interview with the very first, at that time they called him executive directors. My title now is CEO. Phil Singerman, who's still someone I reach out to all the time, has been a great advocate of myself and TEDCO. So Phil and I did an interview there, and it literally just got posted a few hours ago. So we're 25 years old, and we are basically the state's venture capital arm. We act as early stage technology and life sciences investments. And we just did a recent impact study. In those 25 years, we've had about $3 billion of economic impact to the state of Maryland. We've had over $500 million of follow-on investing, created almost 15,000 jobs, and have led to another almost $1 billion of investment capital coming to the state of Maryland that would not have come. Thank you. And we know that number is undercounted. We actually have to go and redo the study because we know that number is undercounted. We have right now about 31 employees at TEDCO, so I call us small and mighty. We have, for those of you that are investment managers, we have over $250 million of assets under management. We have $60 million operating income. I tell people, I used to be a venture capitalist. I've raised funds, so I have the perfect, people who know this business, I have the perfect limited partner. They don't ask for a return, they don't call me, and they give me my administration fee every year on the spot. So they're the perfect limited partner, being the state of Maryland. We are a quasi-government entity of the state, and we do basically 3 pieces to TEDCO. The first piece to TEDCO goes back to our legacy. That is, we do the tech transfer for the 5 research institutions there in Maryland. We actually facilitate that tech transfer. Those 5 research institutions, you may have heard of them. One's called Johns Hopkins, one's called the University of Maryland College Park, University of Maryland Baltimore County, University of Maryland Baltimore, and then the HBCU of Morgan State University. That's right. So we facilitate that tech transfer, and that's been very successful over the last several years to the point other states have emulated that program. It's a 10-year-old. We also, within this kind of tech transfer part of TEDCO, we have an entity called the Maryland Stem Cell Research Commission and Fund. And they do exactly what it sounds like. They provide funding for early stage testing and clinical research using stem cells, not fetal stem cells, but just stem cells that are manufactured. And they have delivered cures around things like diabetes, cancer, dementia, and one of the things that personally is a thing for me, sickle cell. I lost my sister from sickle cell. And so they have done some just tremendous work. Matter of fact, we just had our testimony, our budget testimony at the state. And, you got to go and, I'm sure you have to do it here. You got to go and say, hey, these are all the great things we do. Stem Cell brought in this little boy, he was 8 years old. He was born with that bubble disease. And he had to be in a bubble. He's running around with a bow tie, and he's the cutest little thing, and everybody's crying because the mama does this testimony talking about how he was born with this disease, and because of the research that we do out of stem cell, they were able to cure him. It was big. So the second part of TEDCO is the investment part. And so, and I'm gonna spend more time on that, so just hold that. The third part of TEDCO is we also are an investor, a direct investor in the ecosystem of the state of Maryland. And so what does that mean? So not only do we fund the entrepreneurs, which I'll talk more about, but we fund the wet labs. We fund the incubators. We fund the accelerators. We fund the talent. If you need a lawyer, whatever that entrepreneur needs for their success, we have that. And again, this is for the state of Maryland. And we've been very successful with that model. Matter of fact, this year, one of the many programs that I'll talk a little bit about, we're going to get $1 million a year to launch maker spaces, particularly in communities that we use the term underinvested communities in our rural and urban communities. We're going to invest in several maker spaces. We're going to get $1 million a year for the next 4 years to develop a model that we have around maker spaces throughout the state of Maryland. But on the investment side, we have 3 funds. And so we invest it all the way from very early stage, when it's basically the back of a napkin. From the back of a napkin, we're going to be launching something called a concept fund for about $10,000, all the way through Series A, B, we're putting $2.5 to $3 million. We've had an amazing amount of success with that. And so so we have our venture fund, which puts in anywhere from $500,000 to up to $2.5 million for stage. Our seed funds, where we have, and that's our largest fund, we've got 7 different kind of sub funds there. We're putting anywhere from $200,000 to $1 million. One I want to spend a minute on is our social impact fund. So with our social impact fund, what we're doing there, several years ago, the state legislator gave us what we call the Builder Fund. The Builder Fund was focused on, quote, socially, economically disadvantaged individuals. What does all that mean? People who don't have access to capital. And so we had $1 million, and that first $1 million, which is several years ago before I arrived, we put that into about 15 companies. Of that 15, all these companies started by a woman or someone of color. All 15, half of those 15 companies, less than 2 years later, and also what we do is we assign a coach to them that we pay for. So whatever they need, we assign a coach, and that coach has become a big part of their teams. 9 of those 15 went on to raise another $20 million in less than 2 years. So thank you. So because of that, that $1 million is now going to become $7.5 million of capital that the state is providing us to put into these types of companies. I know the state also, I know Wisconsin got, like all the states got, what's called the State Small Business Credit Initiative, or SSBCI. It's a $10 billion effort by the federal government to move money into what they call, again, it's Fed, so they got to have an acronym, SETI, Socially Economically Disadvantaged Individuals and Communities. So the state of Maryland got $198 million of that. Of that 198, TEDCO got $50 million of that 198. And we're doing 3 things with it. We're putting some of those funds into our venture fund, our late stage venture fund, to our seed fund. But with it, we also created a social impact fund to take the spirit of the Builder Fund, and because there were some statutory limitations on the Builder Fund that we didn't want to go undo, we created the Social Impact Fund to allow us to take the spirit of it, but to address a larger market that we needed to address. But the real point of it is, and this goes to maybe the first test part of this, is that when you think about technology, too many times we think about technology as this really cool thing that's got to be IP or does this really cool thing. That's not what technology really is. Technology enables something. Technology allows you to deliver a different experience to your customer. Technology allows you to deliver it in a way at an economically differentiator. So here's the first cool thing. So and some of y'all may have to go to YouTube to figure out what I'm talking about, but if George Jefferson comes back and starts a cleaning business, and he starts that cleaning business with technology that cleans that clothes better, faster, and cheaper, and delivers the clothes in some Uber-like fashion, that technology I want to invest in, because I want to ask myself, is George a tech entrepreneur who just happens to be in the dry cleaning business, or is he a dry cleaning entrepreneur using technology to fundamentally change the dry cleaning business? The point, the Social Impact Fund for us allows us to invest in technologies that address a societal challenge that may never be ready for traditional institutional capital. Because TEDCO, the way our flywheel is, we put money in at an early stage. We get other investors to come in at later stages. We put it in $1. We hope we get $10, $15, $20 back, in subsequent years. But there's a number of companies, I'm sure, that are here in the Madison region area that will fit that profile. And you need to have a vehicle that allows you to invest in those types, because many of these people of color and women are doing service-based businesses. And the fact is, we believe at TEDCO that any company can be a technology company. We have helped a bottled water company. We've helped a cupcake company become a technology company. And so I would challenge all of you to rethink what technology actually can and should be, because that's the whole point of how you're going to get at this. And I'm also proud to say that on in the larger stage of the venture capital the last several years has just blown up. It's just got a tremendous amount of funds that have gone into it for a variety of macroeconomic reasons. But it has been stuck at 2% of that money has gone to people of color and women. 2%. I'm proud. I've been at TEDCO now for coming up on 3 years. And in those 3 years, we've done about 100 or so deals. And those 100 or so deals, more than half of them have gone to someone of color or a woman. And almost 60% of the money, which is almost about $50 million, has gone to someone of color or a woman. And so we're very proud of that stat. And so I talked to you about SSBCI, so we started social impact, but we did something else with it. Because here's the other problem. It's not just about that there's a lack of money going to these firms. The other challenge is who's managing the money? Who's managing the money? And there's not enough people of color and women managing the money to bring that to the, because here's a quick story before I finish that point. So we got some money, when I first got there, about $5 million from Governor Hogan, the previous governor there in Maryland, during the COVID crisis. And we were to distribute it to companies that were impacted by COVID. And one of my white male managers was in charge of the fund, and then he had 2 black women who were also helping him give out the fund, get to decide. And I had told him this story that, do you know, and I ask you all, do you all know there's this huge multi-billion-dollar business that is highly, highly fragmented, but has extreme customer loyalty, has health, has biology and life sciences and marketing all in it, but is highly fragmented and no venture capitalist ever invested in it. You know what it's called? Black women's hair care. And you know why? Because the white men are making the decisions and they have never experienced what it is to have. I don't have experience with it. I don't have hair either. The black women hair. So we get this money, and the gentleman who was running it, he's telling me the story. He's saying, Troy, this company came to us, and and I didn't want to approve it because I didn't think it fit the technology or life sciences that we do here traditionally at TechCo. He's been at TechCo for a long time. And the 2 black women were like, where has this technology been my whole life? We made the investment at one of our best investments that we made in the last 3 years. And they're probably about to get a significant evaluation uptick. And so what we decided to do, and we're going to hopefully be announcing next week or so with the other part of our SSBCI funds, is we're going to become a limited partner, an investor, in 3 to 4 funds run by and started by someone of color or woman or the first-time fund managers. We're going to be putting $3 to $4 million a piece into at least 3 to 4 funds, and that's going to get announced. And actually, you mentioned Generator. Generator was one. We had almost 50 companies apply for this, and we're going to pick about 5 of them. And so Generator was actually one of the companies that actually applied. So we're very excited about that. And so to wrap up TechCo and to get to my alphabet stuff, and you can go ahead and put the picture up, and I'll explain the picture. So I'm an engineer by training, but I think words matter. Words matter. And so I actually do not believe the wealth gap is something that can ever be solved mathematically. Can never be solved. Why? Because those who have, in order to create wealth, you have to go to those who have, and those who don't have to go to those who have, and you got to pay back those who have a certain return, and therefore you never can close the gap. I think as an engineer, mathematician, I think we have to have a different wealth equation. I think we have to change the equation, the conversation about wealth. And I think it has to be about wealth inclusion and wealth expansion. We have to intentionally, and that's another word, we have to intentionally include and expand those. So last year, the state asked TEDCO to do a study called Equitech. Equitech is a term is used by our friends in Baltimore, a group called Upsurge. And it's how do we build Baltimore into the first city that is driven by technology, but done in an equitable way. Done in a way that ensures participation, leaves no one behind. And so using that term, the state asked us to do a study that looked at how can we rethink this competitiveness of Maryland around technology and life sciences. How do we maintain where we are? Because we got some extreme strengths in cyber, in biology and life sciences. And how do we think about the things that are coming up, things like cyber ag and quantum? How do we do that in a way that rethinks the public-private investment? Because in Maryland, I'm sure here as well, the public drives those investments as opposed to the private sector driving those investments. And most importantly, how do we ensure participation by everyone? And by everyone, that means not just gender and race, but geography as well. We did the study, did some great stuff. It's, if you go to our website, TEDCO, if you Google TEDCO Cultivate, we're calling it now Cultivate, you'll see all of that. And so that drove, and this bill, the request from last year from the legislators asked us to come back to the legislators this year and ask for a $500 million 10-year Equitech growth fund. So that's what the bill said. After much conversation, we decided to do 250 over 5. And through much conversation with a lot of folks, the bill got passed, but not with the same level of funding, but we were committed because the state took a $500 million write-down. So the plan was to fund it. And so we got a couple of million this year, and we're going to get several million for the next 9 years. So this picture you see is from just this week, from Monday, another Alpha brother, Governor Westmore, Alpha brother. Thank you, Mr. Kappa. And yours truly, and then Senator Augustine, who was our lead sponsor of the bill. That's actually at the bill signing this week of the Equitech Growth Fund, which will create a commission of individuals there in Maryland that TechCo will be leading to look at how to ensure that not just the competitors, but how do we rethink the role of the private sector in this partnership? How do we rethink the role of the public sector in this partnership, and how do we ensure participation by all? So we're very excited about this, and so I wanted to make you see that, because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take this combination, as you are doing here, of thinking about this differently. But let me now you can take it down. Now let me get to the point of this. And so I talked about how 2 C's help frame 4 S's to solve the 3T dilemma. So the 2 C's are competition and comparison. The 4 S's are scaling, stitching, storytelling, and stickiness. And the 3 T's are time, talent, and treasure. So I got to read the report. So again, thank you, Jessica and Jason, for sending me the report. And so I'm going to reframe what I saw some of that. So I'm giving you, not that you're doing anything wrong, I want to help you reframe it, because I think, again, words matter. Words matter. And so starting with competition and comparison. So I saw in the report, and just like we do in Maryland, and all areas do, you want to compare yourself to other places. But sometimes what happens in that, we start to think about competition with other places. I would, and I've said this in Maryland, I would argue to you, it's okay to compare and have the right comparator sets. Competition, our real competition isn't other regions in the United States. Our real competition is China. Look, we're building this huge quantum engine there in Maryland. I'm sure you guys are probably looking at it here. We've got the University of Wisconsin here. China has more patents in quantum than the next 4 countries combined, including the United States. China is putting $100 million a year into quantum, growing at 7% per annum. We just invested $25 million in Maryland. The notion of how we have to reframe the conversation, folks, we got to reframe it. It's okay to compare. It's okay to even have some simple competition, but let us not lose who the real competition is. And there's several other countries that I can name that are sitting there watching us fight amongst our 50 states and our different regions. And they're sitting us watching us fight amongst ourselves over some resources. And they're sitting there thinking about it, how they're thinking about it as a country. And so this is not trying to make a political statement, but we've got to rethink how we're thinking about this notion of economic development. And we got to think about it in a much more holistic way, which brings me to my 4 S's. And so the first one is scaling. Like I say in Maryland, we got to add some zeros to stuff, folks. We got to add some zeros. Well, we put 5 million, it needs to be 5 billion. And where it's 5 billion, it might need to be a trillion. We just got to think, we got to think at a different level. We got to scale differently. We got to think differently, because the competition, back to why I said that, the competition is there. And when the way you start to scale is by, you can put the logos up there, is by stitching. Stitching means, how do you start to work fundamentally differently together? And if you stitch well, you scale well. If you scale well, you are forced to stitch. But as one of my friends in Maryland likes to say, the challenge in Maryland is everybody thinks they're on a mountain when they're really on a hill. And they don't recognize that there's a better vista somewhere else if we all went together to get to that other vista. I bet y'all got that here. And I will also tell you the challenge we have in Maryland. Look, you gotta realize Maryland as a state is 6 million people. 6 million people. I told you I grew up in Houston, Texas. That's based in the metropolitan area of Houston. And I told you I grew up in Texas again. The whole physical state of Maryland could fit into a western county of Texas, okay? But the assets we have in Maryland, like you have here in Wisconsin, like you have here in the Madison region, are rivaled by many. We've got outstanding universities. For us in Maryland, we have a number of federal facilities, but we haven't stitched them together. We haven't stitched them together. Because why? Because in order to build an ecosystem, you got to address the ecosystems that come along with it. Thank you, because the real role, if you really understand leadership, is about followership. And if everybody got to decide on one that thing, MadREP is it, and everybody got to line up behind MadREP and just march to that drum. And there's going to be another topic, somebody else is going to be the leader for it. And everybody got to, and they may not like it. And you know what the thing about stitching? The thing about stitching, I remember when I first got into venture capital was negotiating deals, and people told me, the real thing about, if you really want to get to a real solution, you can't make everybody happy. See, happiness. I tell my people at TechCo, my job ain't to make you happy. I could give you everything you want, and you can choose to be happy, to be unhappy. So happiness is not in my job title. It's just not. My job title, and for this, about stitching, is to how to create that compromise. And compromise that means everybody ain't happy. And I'm good with that. When I know everybody ain't happy, we probably got the best compromise we're going to get. But I said you got to scale. You got to stitch. In order to, once you do that, and I've seen that in the report that Jason fed me, you got to storytell. You got to storytell with data. You got to do it in a way that tells the story. And by the way, you got to do it. Let me tell you something that some of y'all may disagree with. I actually believe that the notion of data-informed decision-making is a fallacy. It's a fallacy. Here's why it's a fallacy. I told you I'm a computer scientist. Data, and by the way, I didn't tell you, I'm also I'm a comic book Marvel guy, DC guy. So, but it gets to the point. Data is a picture. It's a moment in time. It's just that. It's that. It's that. It's that. It's that. That and that and that and that and that. Now, if you collect a bunch of data through visualization tools and data tools, I think data combined and visualized becomes information. Information with strategy, some gut instinct, becomes knowledge. It's when you gain knowledge, you make decisions. You make knowledge-based decisions. And guess what happens when you make knowledge-based decisions? You create data, which starts the cycle all over again. And so when you do storytelling, you got to do it in a way that makes sense. And one just as a pivot, so when I was telling y'all that I want to go be a priest, what I didn't tell you is I got influenced in my early, because nobody in my family was Catholic, they were all Baptist ministers, right? And so I always was enamored with Baptist ministers because, they talk in alliterations. So that's what I've been doing with y'all, right? And so, the C's and the S's and the T's. But the other thing, and tell me y'all gonna get this, is I do call and response too. So, I'm looking for a little back and forth and, I ain't up here. Yeah, come on, talk to me. Talk to me. Yeah, I ain't passing no plate, I promise. And those y'all in the back, this is church, okay? And so we gonna deal with that. And so you got to think, so as you think about the storytelling in a much more data-informed way, or knowledge-based way, it becomes a cycle, right? Because the better you storytell, the more resource you get to do what? Scale, stitch, and storytell. And for those of you that know about computer science, I just created a do loop. Let's create a great do loop. Because the more I scale, the more I stitch, the better I storytell, I can start all over again. But at some point, the do loop has to stop. That gets to the fourth S, right? And I'm sure you guys want it, we want it too. That's stickiness. The whole point of TEDCO is how do I create a higher level of stickiness for companies that start, grow, get invested, and scale in Maryland. Same thing here in Wisconsin. And there's a way to measure that. There's a way to measure that. And speaking of measures, before I close out with the 3 T's, the way you got to, let me tell you also that I believe we've got to rethink these metrics that we use. Look, the metrics we use today, here's a trick question I've done to not just this governor, but other governors, other folks. I said, look, here's a trick question. Company in Maryland, post a job. This is scenario 1. Scenario 1, company in Maryland, post a job, hire somebody in California, and they stay in California to do that job. Scenario 1. Scenario 2, company in California, post a job, hire somebody in Maryland. They stay in Maryland to do the job. Here's the trick question. Now remember I said it's a trick question. Scenario 1 or scenario 2 is the traditional definition of job growth for the state of Maryland. Answer, neither and both. Why? Because the way our tax systems work. And the way our metrics work. Because our metrics assume that Jason's going to show up 5 days a week, sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day. Because what we have, ladies and gentlemen, you all sitting at circle tables, we have a circle problem. We have a circle problem. You know what the circle problem is? Everything happens, all our metrics assume something happens in a circle. That circle is called a county, a state, a legislative district, and the metrics assume that the person and the impact happen inside that circle. And so we try to measure it. COVID said, screw it. Right? Because think about it. Our whole, as a society, our society, whether it's about our churches, our businesses, our schools, or the way we educate, the way we entertain ourselves, everything we've done is built on a couple of simple principles, right? One, how many people can I fit into a smaller space as possible? Right? And the second assumption is that I assume everybody, every day, wakes up in the morning, has breakfast at home, takes the kids to school, goes to work, goes to well, for us, it was swim practice. Our kids were swimmers, competitive swimmers. So we would go to swim practice, go back home. That was those 2 things. Everybody, our metrics assume those 2 things. Big space, small as possible. That cycle of back and forth. COVID said, nope. But guess what? Our metrics are still trying to measure that. I would challenge you as you think about your plan, we're doing this too, as you think about what you got to do, we think about what I cultivate, what are those new metrics? What are the metrics that need to be used to really define what your economic vitality and viability is? What's the definition of what a job growth really should be? And should you even be measured? Like I've said at TEDCO, I don't want to be held accountable for job growth. I know that sounds crazy. I don't. I want it because the biggest company at TEDCO, it's got 3 people, maybe 4. And so why not hold me accountable, hold TEDCO accountable for the economic impact we bring to the state around, are we bringing capital to the state that but for would not come to the state? Are we retaining talent in the state but for would leave the state? Are we attracting talent that but for would not come to the state? Hold us accountable for that. Because as I close, the whole point of this, as I said, was that the 2 C's had to lead to help frame the 4 S's, which helped solve the 3 T's. And what are those 3 T's? Because we said, look, stop over competing, but have the right comparators, which by the way require the right metrics. And in order to do that, you've got to scale differently. You've got to stitch differently. You've got to storytell differently to create the stickiness. And you're doing all that because every entrepreneur that I know, by the way, I've said innovation, entrepreneurship, because they're 2 different things. Innovation is about changing how you do something, being really cool about it. Entrepreneurship is bringing it to market. And so the 3 T's that we try to solve at TEDCO, and I think you are too, is that every entrepreneur faces these challenges. Every entrepreneur faces a time challenge, a talent challenge, and I need the 3rd T, a treasure challenge. And so what's the point as I close? The whole point is, what you should all be talking about is how do you give an entrepreneur back a minute and valuing that minute, and you can measure the value of that minute. How do you give that entrepreneur access to a diverse and deep talent pool that exists here in Wisconsin? And lastly, how do you help them find where X marks the spot, where the treasures are? And treasure isn't always about the cash. Sometimes it's about access to an incubator or an accelerator or a lawyer or a program. Whatever that treasure is that they need, that treasure box that they need for their growth. And by the way, I said I was going to close, but let me, one of the things we are trying to do at TEDCO, and I think I'm allowed, I think some questions are going to be some Q&A, so I hope we get time for some Q&A, is talking about the metrics, right? Metrics and data do basically one thing. They help you look back on what you did, right? But I would challenge you, and we're doing this at TEDCO, how do I look forward and be predictive? What if you could show up at an entrepreneur's front door 2 to 3 months before they hit a certain trigger point in their evolution, and not just showed up, but say, here are the 3 things that you need, and we've already pre-qualified you for. We have an engine that we call the Maryland Entrepreneur Hub that does exactly that. It basically scrapes out there and says, okay, we know what you need, and here it is. And we're building an intuitive engine with it that's going to say, okay, because we've been able to get some more data from you, and we actually, because of the way we're working with different companies and the way we get access to their information, we know where you're about to hit a trigger point. And once you get to that trigger point, here's a new set of resources. Here's a new set of relationships. Here's a new set of scaling and stitching that we know you need. And so the point being, folks, as you think about how do you think differently about competition and comparators, as you rethink how you want to scale and stitch and storytell here in the Madison area, and that leads to a higher level of stickiness, I would ask you to always consider that at the end of the day, these entrepreneurs and these innovators and their time, their need for time, their need for talent, and need for treasure. Again, I thank you all for your attention. I thank you all for allowing me to be here today. So, if I didn't overly bore you, any questions? I see a hand in the back. I don't know where the mic is at. That's the back. That's the back of the church. So the back of the church was paying attention, folks. So I like that.
You made a comment about adding technology to areas that they aren't typically done. You gave us an example, but you didn't tell us how you integrated that technology into it. If you could just elaborate a little bit on that point.
Tell me, which piece, tell me.
The hair care.
Ah, yes. Yeah, no.
It's personal for me.
No, I got a wife and a daughter, so, you know. So in that specific case, again, because we invest in technology, again, I think we too much time focus on technology and life sciences. So we invest in technology. And at the end of the day, hair care is biology. It's biology. It's life sciences. That's what it is, right? And so it's chemistry. It's a bunch of chemical reactions taking place in the hair. And so I think the answer to your question is reframing our mind as to what the definition of technology is the answer to the question. And so specifically for us, it was just, and look, we're still doing, I'm not pretending that we're always there at TEDCO. There's still individuals who don't see some of these places that we've started to invest in as places that are traditional for TEDCO, and that's true. But my argument is, if we are investing in innovation, entrepreneurship, guess what? We have to be innovative and entrepreneurial in what we do and how we do it. And so I think the answer to the question is more rethinking what the definition of tech and life sciences could be. As another example of a space that we are in that you may not think we would be in, one of our more successful entrepreneurs actually is a young black man, actually, alpha brother, who has a company called RemodelMate that is focused on renovations for bathrooms. He's like, what's that got to do with technology? Well, he's developed a cool technology that allows him to reprice those things because he knows all the variabilities that can happen in a bathroom, and he knows he knows the economics of the contractors, he knows the economics of the supply and the supply chain, and he's able to marry that technology. And so remember what I said is that technology isn't always about doing this cool Google-like thing. Technology changes the experience that you have with the product. Technology changes the way in which you how you defend that product, or technology changes your economics. Here's the question I ask people all the time on this, and I hope I'm answering your question, is so my man Jason over here has a fork. Here's a fork, and this fork is off the chain. This fork can do some amazing things. And all y'all love it. He's got massive market share, and all y'all paying $100 for his fork. Now, my Kappa brother, Ruben, over here, he's got a fork too. And it does some of the same stuff that Jason's fork does. And he can produce that fork for $5. Here's the question. What should Ruben sell his fork for? Bingo. Bingo. And so the point I'm getting at is when you have these cool innovations and you're going into a space where there's huge competition, you got to be ready to, because whoever has market share there ain't going to just let you sit there and take market share. You better grab as much cash as you can while you can before the price war starts. And so part of the answer to the question also is helping entrepreneurs understand the marketplace they're in. So I didn't talk about this, but one of the tools that we do have at TEDCO, we have access to all these huge market databases that are basically very expensive market databases that you couldn't do on your own. Anybody in the ecosystem in Maryland has access to these market databases. And we've actually we're actually about to do a virtual ability. So right now you got to come physically to do it, which is a pain. We're about to create a model where they can get access to them. So I think the answer to your question is more about rethinking what technology is, giving them the resource to rethink that, and giving them the understanding of how the economics in that particular market space works. Thank you. I see a hand up here. I can't, the lights are getting me, so I can't see all the way in the back, church people in the back, but I see a hand right here. Oh, man.
How did you get the state of Maryland to partner with you?
Well, one, we're 25 years old, so we've been around for a minute. But I can tell you, like this last session, Annapolis is the capital, and they have a session that's 90 days. They start in early January. They finish up in April. And I can literally tell you, I joke about it, but it's the truth. I spent literally almost every day for like 6 weeks in Annapolis. And so the answer to the question is building real relationships with key legislators, building relationships with the governor. I mean, I'm very proud, when I sit and look at the state of Maryland, when I see, not just see Wes Moore, but when I see our lieutenant governor is an immigrant from India. When I see our controller is the first white woman controller, is a good friend of mine. I see the treasurer is a black guy, and I see the Speaker of the House is a black woman. And so we're in a really interesting place in Maryland right now with that diversity of leadership sitting there at that. It's just amazing. So, but the answer to your question is time. Actually, let me back up. Producing what we've done historically. I mean, I'm the 6th CEO/ED to sit in this chair, the first black to do that. And so having a record of success isn't critical, but being able to storytell is the other part. So I don't just I just do this alliteration I think we didn't do a good job historically of storytelling, and we just assumed that people would know what we do. And you can't with legislators, they got 1,000 things on their mind, as Jason probably knows. And so you got to be able to tell the story in a very clear and accurate way. But also, what we did this time, we created what we call the Coalition of the Willing. So if you go look at our website, Cultivate Maryland, you will see a number of folks who we've actively recruited to create this, what we call the Coalition of the Willing. And it's back to stitching. Again, these S's aren't just kind of random. It's how do you rethink that? And so the conversation wasn't about TEDCO, and it wasn't about Troy. It was about these massive leaders across the business sector, black and white, male and female, who said, now's the time. Now's the time, Maryland. We didn't get all the money we asked for, but I was left with the commitment that we would get the monies eventually. But now's the time, and so because of that, those conversations, both in the private sector and the philanthropic sector and at the Capitol, we've created this momentum that I think is going to allow us to start doing some pilots with the monies that we do have. So thank you for that. And I think they're about to shut me down. So thank you all.
Thank you, Troy. What a wonderful story. You sure you're not a Baptist preacher? No. You had a lot.